Hey, this is Robert Plank from the Marketer of the Day podcast, and I want to help you create your own podcast. And so let me ask you a question. Where would you be today if you didn't take a little bit of a risk, if you didn't take a little bit of a chance getting that job or quitting that job or asking that special person out or going on a first date? Well, you know where you'd be right now? You'd be living with regret. You'd be saying to yourself, I wish I'd done better. I wish I'd done more. I wish I'd just gotten started despite the fear or despite all these little obstacles that I'm putting in front of myself. I think all the time, should I have a green screen background behind me? Should I have moved that chair behind me? Should I have done a quick shave? None of that matters. What matters most to you today and for the rest of your life is just showing up, because a lot of the things that you think are important, the little fine details, those are just add-ons. Those are just nice to haves that you can throw in there later. So this camera I'm talking to you in, I bought it about a year ago because I wanted a slightly better camera. This microphone I'm talking to you from, it's a microphone that I bought because I got tired of talking on a goofy, cheapo headset. So think about the difference between those two things of just getting anything set up, just getting started versus the fine-tuned details that you probably wouldn't have known that you needed until you felt the hurt or until you actually got a little bit of experience under your belt recording your podcast, right? Because a lot of people out there, they say, I'll start on my podcast as soon as I get all the fancy lights, and I'll make it a video podcast, and I'll have all kinds of microphones, and I'll do all sorts of editing, and I'll plan the whole thing out. And then they make things way too complicated, way too hard on themselves, and then they don't even get around to creating that podcast in the first place. So don't be like that. Don't be another statistic. Don't let yourself think it all has to be perfect. And in fact, it's better if it's not perfect, because number one, you'll actually get something done and you'll have fun. And number two, you'll get points just for showing up. You'll get points for a little bit of the amateurness, a little bit of the realness. And so don't have that sort of polish, and put the things that you need to put out in one take. Just get it done. Just get it out there. Trust me, just get started. And the system for that is podcastcrusher.com. Now, here's what I want to tell you about some of the light bulb aha moments when I went from not sure if a podcast is for me to yes, I have to have a podcast. So what you need to do is to be a creator of content, right? You need to have things to say, because if no one knows what it is that you do, or no one knows what it is that you sell, or no one knows what sort of point you have to make, then what the heck are you even doing? So you need to podcast, and you might have heard that you need to maybe blog or write articles, but then you said, okay, well, I'm not really sure what to blog about, and maybe I spent a little time typing a few things, but I might have spent a week making a blog post that no one else even listened to, and now I spent all this time to make this thing. And so instead of writing a blog post that no one will read, then put out a podcast that you made in just a few minutes that you can then transcribe into something written, but also you can tap into this whole new audience of podcast listeners. And let me explain. Do you own one of these things? Do you own a cell phone? Well, if you do, then you might have podcasts on there, and you might have the built-in podcast app, and people from all over the world are super duper busy. And when they're on their computer, either they're working or they're browsing Facebook. So when does that leave time to hear about you? To hear about you as maybe you're a doctor or a dentist or a realtor or a trainer on the stock market or some sort of a health coach. But when is there time for someone to listen in or learn a few things? Well, the answer is usually when they're in the car, walking, at the gym, going to and from places, picking up the kids from soccer practice, whatever it is. And that's where podcasting jumps in. Because I guess I first jumped into this sort of stuff when I heard I needed to have a blog, right? Needed to write content, needed to post on forums. And that got old after a while. And then I realized that a better way of me getting the information out there, plus having it be in my voice, is to record it on a podcast. And I recorded a few of those, and I was started getting a little tired of doing it. But then I noticed that there were some marketers whose email lists I was on. And the ones that had podcasts, I would listen to those podcasts. And then I got to the point where I got so overloaded with email that I started unsubscribing from other people's lists, from other people's newsletters. And then I noticed that the people whose podcasts I was listening to, I did not unsubscribe. And those people that I listened to podcasts of, once I felt the need to jump back into email on their email list and buy things from them, they were still in my ear. So there were a lot of people who I was on their list, I was reading their emails, didn't have a podcast. I stopped listening to them forever. And then there were the people who I was on their list, they had podcasts. I dropped off of email from them, but then I still listened to their podcasts. And then when I jumped back in and I was in a buying mood again, then they were still top of mind for me. So I thought, if that's not a reason to have a podcast, I don't know what is. Just for the fact that we all get our information in different ways, and you can't rely on Facebook to get through. You can't rely on YouTube to get through. You can't rely on email to get through. So you have to be everywhere, and especially have that attitude of somebody might be subscribed to me in multiple places. They might follow me on Facebook, email, and on my podcast. And if they drop off from some, then if they're only subscribed in one place, they're gone forever. But if they are subscribed still on a couple of places, they might come back into the fold when the timing is right, when they decide to pick up their business again, when they decide to revamp their website again, when they decide to jump into paid advertising again. They might then listen to me and Lance and hop back on and onto the Robert and Lance train, right? So have a podcast just so that you have multiple ways of talking to people, so that you have multiple ways of getting your message out there, so that way it sounds like you don't have to spend your whole life creating videos with the perfect lighting, or spending your whole life typing just the right blog post that might not pan out. So have a podcast for that reason. But then things get even more interesting, because then I went through maybe time number 3 when I was about to give up on podcasting, and Mr. Lance did something. My business partner Lance Tomashiro did something that really blew my mind, which was he began inviting guests onto his podcast. And I thought, why would you do that? Isn't your podcast just sort of your turf and your place to say whatever the heck you want? But then it dawned on me that his guests would fill in the blanks in different areas where maybe he or I do not have an expert skill set. So talking about LinkedIn ads, talking about marketing on Instagram, talking about feng shui and mindset, and other people are experts in areas where you are not. And other people have different opinions or different slants on things where they can give you and your listeners a different way of looking at things. And so that's great, because now other people can create that content for you, and then you can build more and more of a following. And all you really have to do is just say, tell me more about that, or how did you get started? What do? You ask questions, and that guest that you have on is more than willing to go on and on about themselves, about their products, about people they have helped. It's hard not to talk about that sort of stuff. And so this is a really interesting system here where other people are creating the content for you. And these people that create the content for you, some of them, all they do is hop on podcasts all day long, all day, every day. They've been on hundreds of podcasts. They're used to it. It's a really smooth process. They'd love to be on your podcast. Now, why would they love to do that? Because they're completely fine spending 20, 30 minutes, hopping on a phone call. You click the record button, and knowing that they only had to put in 20, 30 minutes of work, and then now that's yet one more media appearance from them, where now the recording of you and them will live on forever and ever. And over time, it might get hundreds or thousands of listens. And so if some prospective customer is looking up this person, then they can find the podcast episode of you and them, and then that's a link back to their site, and just everybody wins, because you get the content, you help out your people, but you also are promoting this guest who is on your show, who you make look super smart. And so this is a great way for you to maybe think about some of these things and ask yourself, well, When was the last time I really put myself out there? When was the last time I really looked into any sort of joint venture? Maybe if you have seen someone run a webinar where they introduce someone else on that webinar and that guest seemed really smart, maybe you could say, well, I could be that person who I just hop on and I say, I want to welcome you to this webinar and it's great, but let me pass it off to this other person. The other person does all the scary stuff. The other person does all the stuff of looking smart and selling, and you just get a commission. But that didn't just happen overnight, right? That person hosting a webinar to then pass it off to someone else, that was part of a relationship that might have taken a few months to develop. There might have been some people meeting at an offline event. There might have been an email exchange happening. And I don't know about you, but when someone says, oh, let's work together, let's joint venture, let's hop on a call, let's chit chat, I'm thinking, I don't want to spend all day long doing that. I don't want to spend hours just talking to someone and having nothing really come of it. And a better way to get to know someone is to have them on your podcast, because that way you can figure out what they're all about. You can figure out very quickly if they know what they're talking about or not. And even if their relationship doesn't lead anywhere, at least you recorded a podcast episode together. At least you helped them out. And so having someone on your podcast is a really good idea for a networking tool. But a trap a lot of people fall into is they say, well, I have to make a podcast that's just about this, just about internet marketing, just about losing weight, just about a book. And the reality is you shouldn't focus on a niche with your podcast. You should go as wide as possible. That way you can be known for that one little thing that you're good at in your niche, but then you have all these other guests who appear in kind of complementary different ways. And so sometimes I'll have mindset people, I'll have health people, I'll have financial people on my podcast, and we'll tailor that message to entrepreneurs. We'll say, let's say that you're an entrepreneur and you have extra money, you need to plan for your financial future, but my podcast is just not a financial podcast. So I hope you see the difference there. Likewise, let's say that you are a financial planner, retirement planner person. Maybe you can have a real estate flipper on your podcast, or maybe you know nothing about that and you say, a lot of people listening, they're looking into planning their financial future, and a great way to do that is from real estate flipping. So do you see how you can focus on your core area, and then other people out there in the periphery, on the outer edges, can come in and stop by and give new takes or new angles on different things. And so it's a really great networking tool where people have been on my podcast and bought things from me, and I've been on other people's podcasts and I've bought coaching from them. I've bought products from them. I've bought courses from them. So there was someone on my podcast who I ended up spending $4,000 on for a few months to help figure out a done-for-you service I wanted to provide. There was someone else who hopped on. I ended up buying a few of his books. Someone else who hopped on, I ended up buying his course about guest blogging. Another lady hopped on, and I ended up paying her for an hour of coaching. So there's so many new opportunities, as long as you get over that little bit of a fear of talking to a person. And you talk to people all day long. You talk to strangers all day long, right? Even like going to Starbucks and things like that. So what's the problem? And these people that you are talking to, they're very friendly. They're very receptive. It's not like you're a telemarketer. You're talking to people who they want to be on your show. You have something they want. If anything, they're in a way telemarketing you, but it's a great start to a relationship. And there's so many just opportunities that are in front of you, because you can start off by having some sort of an expert on your podcast. And at some point in the future, if you want to host a webinar for them, that's another step in their relationship. If at some point in the future you want to run an online virtual summit or do a Facebook live stream together, then contact them again and get that scheduled. And one thing I wanted to share with you as we're winding down this conversation we're having is I was paid to make this book. This book is filled with my different podcast guests, and they all paid to have a chapter in this, and they all love to be in it. And I've sent copies to everyone. They are promoting the book. I'm promoting the book for them. So it's a really, really great way to have other people involved in your business. So don't go it alone. You might have heard John Rockefeller say, I'd rather have 1% of 100 people's effort than 100% of one person's effort. And you might even notice that in the background here, I've just got stacks and stacks of these books that I'm going to be using for more networking. And you can get this book at marketerofthedaybook.com if you're curious about it. And let me show you what we have here. So we have every person here just has a different chapter, right? We have Craig Ballantyne, we have Bernie Thompson, we have Ruby Tan. So we have River Easter. Everyone has a chapter in a book. And what I did was interviewed each person. And then after I interviewed these different people, then I said, well, now that we've interviewed together, how would you like me to transcribe our conversation, clean it up, take me out of it, take me asking the questions out of it, so it's just left with you talking about, in this case, talking about the 5 stages of divorce. And so it becomes a very easy transaction. I even added in lots of different things in here. So we said, well, now that you've read this person's chapter, then now it's time for you to look at your next steps. And now it's time for you to get your contact information. So what if you did this? What if you had your own podcast? What if you invited people on your show? What if you had a quick conversation, you put it up there, you showed that you know what you're doing, you showed that you can help get more traffic, you can help get more eyeballs, help get more attention to their business, their cause, whatever they have going on, and then you think of some of these different ways to monetize this. Maybe you can get some of these authors on as a guest speaker on your webinar, or have them deliver a bonus for your course, or just some sort of a joint venture networking sort of thing. And you better believe that I'm going to be repeating this book creation process and helping people, and I get helped as well. But none of this can happen unless you create your very own podcast. There are a lot of podcasts out there, but there are also a lot of people out there who don't have podcasts. And so it's up to you to decide which is more important. Waiting around, being scared, having regret, wondering what could have been, that's one choice for you. But another choice is to go for it and be one of those people who takes some action, takes the risk, and creates a podcast while a lot of other people out there are wondering if they should do it, wondering how to do it, overthinking it. And the place where we want to help you do that is podcastcrusher.com. And that's the next logical step for you and your business. Because as you know, email marketing is always super crowded. Blogging is what it is. Social media is crowded. Video is a whole thing to figure out, and all those things are parts of your business that you can add on, ramp up to. But I think that everyone, including you, especially you, needs to create a podcast. It's easier than you think, and there's less commitment than you think. Because think about this. You can click a record button, you can talk for literally 5 minutes, and that is enough for you to submit a podcast to Apple iTunes, to Google Play, to SoundCloud, to all these different places. And now you have content to send to your list. Now you have traffic coming to your site from these podcasting directories. Now you have people who then can subscribe to your podcast and get a notification on their phone when you have a new episode. And now you have something to invite people to. So whenever the next time that someone emails you, or you make a friend on Facebook, or someone gives you their business card at a networking event, now you have a place to send them to, and now it's no longer a waste of time. Now you can have them on your podcast, and now you have built-in networking from all these different ways. So I'm Robert Robert Plank from podcastcrusher.com. Create a podcast. Stop thinking about it. Do it. Join us inside of podcastcrusher.com. We show you the simplest, easiest, fastest way to get started. And then you can go from there and you can decide to be a perfectionist later, but you can be an action taker for now. Robert Plank, podcastcrusher.com. I'll see you there. Embrace your imperfection. Doesn't matter if you have a wooden chair in the background, if you haven't gotten a haircut, or if your lighting isn't that great. No one is going to notice. Most people are too busy thinking about themselves to notice about all of your imperfections, which are not imperfections, or who you are. So Robert Plank, podcastcrusher.com. I'll see you in there. Create a podcast. Bye now.